Thank you this morning, Lord, for the beautiful day you've given us, Lord, for those that have chosen to be faithful in the house of God, Lord, as we gather this morning. Lord, I pray that you would use your text again to be an encouragement and a challenge to us as we study it this morning. Lord, I do pray that you be with the many needs that mentioned this morning, Lord. Miss Talbot, you know she's not feeling well. Lord, she had a long trip back and forth from Virginia, Lord, and it took its toll, and she's not feeling well today. I pray that you be with her and raise her up again. Lord, I pray that you'd continue to be with the Larry Catchell family, Lord, and be with him, Lord, as you know, there's still not a lot of good responsiveness from him, Lord, and I pray that you'd have your hand there. Lord, I do pray that you be with the needs mentioned here, Lord, for the baby Wyatt Upton, Lord. You know that you are the great physician, Lord, and just because the doctors say it's impossible doesn't mean it's impossible. Lord, at the same time, you had your hand in that womb from the moment of conception, Lord, and I pray that you'd have your hand in that baby's life, Lord, and in the family as they make decisions, Lord, and I pray that you would get the honor and the glory, Lord, no matter what the circumstances may be. Lord, I pray that you be with Tyler Rutan, Lord, as he is sitting now in the hospital, Lord, with his life in the balances, Lord, as a result of a fight. I pray that you be with him. Lord, I pray most of all that he's saved, Lord, and if he's not, Lord, that this would, Lord, he would be given another opportunity to say yes, Lord, and that he would see how fragile life really is. Lord, I pray that you be with their family, Lord, as they're grieving and as they're fearful for the future days to come. Lord, I pray that you use this as an opportunity for them to see the Holy Spirit's power in their lives, Lord, either through salvation or through comfort. Lord, I pray that you'd be with the June Vega family, Lord, as they've faced a prognosis that no one ever wants to get. I pray that you'd, Lord, be an encouragement to them, Lord, and Lord, that you'd, again, be with them during this time. Lord, I pray that you be with Brother Jesse as he's, Lord, facing a decision here in the near future. Pray that you'd give him wisdom to make the right decision, Lord, and to seek wisdom and counsel from those that would give it from the Bible as far as to what he should do. Lord, and I do pray that you'd also give him wisdom in how to handle a situation with a fellow employee, Lord, that he would handle it in a way that would honor you, Lord, and would resolve this issue satisfactorily. Lord, I pray that also you be with the Ham family, Lord. You know they'd love to see their son come to Christ, Lord, and I pray that you be with them. Lord, be with my family, Lord, as I continue to pray for, Lord, my children who are coming of age to learn what it means to be saved, Lord, and that they get saved, Lord, and for my mother and my sisters and my nephews and my brother-in-law as well. Lord, I do pray that you be with us this morning, Lord. In your name I pray. Amen. All right, so we are in Acts chapter 25, and this is a little bit of a transition as far as going from the transitioning into the period of being standing before the leader in Jerusalem to now being transferred eventually to the leaders in Rome. And as we look at this text, we're going to see the fact that it's our job to make the most of every moment, to make the most of every opportunity, and that's exactly what Paul is going to do here. But here in Acts chapter 25, the Bible starts off by saying, "Now, when Festus was come into the province, after 3 days he ascended from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest and the chief of the Jews informed against Paul and besought him, and desired favor against him that he would send for him to Jerusalem, lying in wait to kill him. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself would depart shortly thither. Let them therefore, said he, which among you are able, go down with me, and accuse this man, if there be any wickedness in him. And when he had tarried among them more than 10 days, he went down unto Caesarea the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. And when he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood round about, and laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. While he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar, have I offended anything at all. But Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, answered Paul and said, Wilt thou go up to Jerusalem, and there be judged of these things before me? Then said Paul, I stand at Caesarea's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews have I done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. For if I be offender or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. But if there be none of these things whereof they accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. I appeal unto Caesar. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, Hast thou appealed unto Caesar? Unto Caesar shalt thou go. And after certain days, King Agrippa and Bernice came unto Caesarea to salute Festus. And when they had been there many days, Festus declared Paul's case unto the king, saying, There is a certain man left in bonds by Felix, about whom, when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priest and the elders of the Jews informed me, desiring to have judgment against him. To whom I answered, It is not the manner of the Romans to deliver any man to die before that which he is accused have the accusers face to face, and have license to answer for himself concerning the crime laid against him. Therefore, when they were come hither without any delay on the morrow, I sat on the judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought forth. Against whom, when the accusers stood up, they brought none accusation of such things as I supposed, but had certain questions against him of their own superstition, and of one Jesus which was dead, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. And because I doubt of such manner of questions, I asked him whether he would go to Jerusalem and there be judged of these matters. But when Paul had appealed to be reserved unto the hearing of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I might send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said unto Festus, I would also hear the man myself. Tomorrow, said he, thou shalt hear him. And on the morrow, when Agrippa was come, and Bernice with great pomp, and was entered into the place of hearing with the chief captains and principal men of the city, at Festus' commandment, Paul was brought forth. And Festus said, King Agrippa, and all men which are here present with us, ye see this man, about whom all the multitude of the Jews have dealt with me, both at Jerusalem and also here, crying that he ought not to live any longer. But when I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and that he should hath appealed to Augustus, I have determined to send him, of whom I have no certain thing to write unto my Lord. Wherefore I have brought him forth before you, and especially before thee, O King Agrippa, that after examination had, I might have somewhat to write. For it seemeth to me unreasonable to send a prisoner, and not withal to signify the crimes laid against him. Now, of course, you've got to love this section. Tons of politics wrapped up in this one little section. Not much different than the way things operate today. But you know what I think is interesting, this point, and again, we try to create a timeline that's a week everything takes place so quickly. Know that between Acts 24 and Acts 25, there was a 2-year holding period, because it said that he would be kept in holding for 2 years. So this didn't just happen overnight. Paul's been sitting in Caesarea for 2 years, waiting on furtherance to happen. During that time, again, you've got to imagine Paul sitting there going, man, I know I could be easy with God. I know that I have work for me to do. Why in the world would he be setting me aside for 2 years? Let's get this moving. There's other stuff for me to do. There's people to reach. There's people that need to be saved. You know, you can have imagine singing, People need the Lord. They're sitting there saying, oh, come on, why aren't you having me do something? You know, and if nothing else, I think there's a lesson in itself in the fact that sometimes there is a time of consistently waiting. That doesn't mean you're doing nothing. That means you're doing what God told you to do, and you continue doing it until He tells you to change. And I know we've been there as a church. You've been there as a Christian, I'm sure, at one point or another, just praying, saying, God, whoa, come on, next step. Let's go. Let's get this done. We're right there right now saying, Lord, we need another building for the school. And really, the truth is, the loan is going to be called again. We only got a 1-year extension. Lord, we need to do something. And yet, it seems as if He tarries. He just waits. But what's interesting, even more than just the waiting period, is that in 2 years worth of time, the people didn't want to kill Paul unless it was a sorrow. Nothing had changed. They still hated Paul just as much then as they did before. Their hatred was still just as strong that even when they found a new opportunity, they said, oh, great, there's a new person in the game. Okay, hey, I tell you what, this Paul, have you heard about him? Well, no, not really. Well, he's sitting over at Caesarea, and you know, this local judge, man, he sent him over there. I have no idea why he's over there. He's guilty of crimes here in Jerusalem. Can you go bring him back so we can judge him? And of course, planning to lay in wait, jump the caravan and kill him on the way home. He said, well, I don't know. I don't know the man, so I'm pretty sure if he's at Caesarea, he's supposed to be there. If you want to follow with me, we'll go on down there. So they go down there, and we'll follow through, and you'll see what the rest of the events take place. But Paul uses every opportunity. Now we're going to get to the heart of his opportunity in chapter 26, so that'll be next Sunday. But we see the build-up and the line-up to that to that speech he's able to offer. You know, if the Apostle Paul were alive today, you and I would probably not want him to become the pastor of your church. You do a background check and find that, man, that dude's been in jail quite a bit. Man, he's got a record. I don't know about him. And then you'd sit there and start investigating and find out that he's got enemies all over the country. Well, I don't know. If we make him the pastor, I mean, good grief, we could be facing some serious problems if he became the pastor of this church. You know, the truth is, most people wouldn't want anything to do with him if it was now, if Paul were trying to candidate for your church today. But the proof was he was doing exactly what God wanted him to do. Paul was willing to pay the cost to be faithful to the Lord, and he paid dearly. He paid dearly. He gave up everything. He was faithfully testifying to the Lord and Jesus everywhere he went, and the price he paid at sometimes was overwhelming. Nonetheless, Paul was able to take advantage of virtually every opportunity he had. Now there's a stranger. Have not seen that face in a while. How are you doing? I say, I'm sorry, I got to stop. It's been a while since we've seen you. Man, it's good to see you again. Say, this is Miss Piliana. We have not seen her. You've been in Maryland? North Carolina. Okay, North Carolina. It's been a while. It's good to see you. I'm glad you were able to come back again. But we're in Acts chapter 25. But so Paul taking advantage of every opportunity he had. In fact, in the book of Philippians, Paul wrote of this. He said in chapter 1, verses 11 through 13, he said, "Not that I speak in respect of want, for I've learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. I know both how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Now that's an awesome text to quote. A whole lot harder to look. You know, we want to say, I can both abound and I can suffer need. Yeah, I'm going to drive that same vehicle I've been driving. Man, I'd love to have that new truck that you have been thinking. Maybe it's still the one that's going to have a vehicle who's, I'd love to there. But, you know, I'd love to have that, but I just got to drive my old truck. Well, that's not suffering need. That's not what he's talking about. He said there were things I need, not suffer or want. There were things I needed I didn't have. He said, I know how to be hungry. You know, throws a whole monkey wrench into the whole works of the modern church movement that tells you, if you serve God, everything. He's going to shake it up, stir it, and dump it out on you. So your cup is going to run over. And Paul says, I've had a different cup. I've been hungry when my stomach was growing and I didn't know where food was coming from. So Paul would have a little bit of argument with that health, wealth, and prosperity gospel that says if you serve God, everything's going to feel great. You know, I think you're confusing yourself and delusional if you think that, because living your own life, I think everyone here would say there were times when they've been where you were at the bottom and you didn't have basic needs. You come to church wearing shoes with holes in it because you didn't have money to replace it. You had felt that was broken that you maybe duct tape back together. I mean, I've been there, you know, where things just, you're at the bottom. Paul said, I know what it's like to suffer need and to have more than I need. He said, I know what it's like to be even suffering and hungry and in loss and not having what I need. So Paul said, regardless of his circumstances, he took advantage of every opportunity to speak to the name of Christ. And as we look at this, we're going to dive into this example here. In verses 1 through 12, we start off where we see the governor evaluate an evil plot. Now, the governor at this point, he steps in, and this is Festus. He steps into this point, and he's given the opportunity to hear about Paul. Now, at this point, the news, he was traveling around, but Festus was not from this area. He was traveling through. He was one of the larger leaders. More than likely, he might have been given a letter saying that he had an important matter he had to consider. So he had stopped into town. He'd been there for over 10 days before he even considered this one thing. He's kind of like any other politician. We've got work to do, but we'll do that in between vacations. So that's kind of what he was doing, having a good time. Been there for 10 days and thought, I'm supposed to do something while I was here, wasn't I? So he goes down and meets with the people. And the Jewish leaders, of course, they request Festus, they meet with him. And then as they meet with him, he said, verse 2 through 3, then the high priest and the chief of the Jews informed him against Paul, and besought him, and desired favor against him, that he would send for him to Jerusalem, lying in wait to kill him. So they're trying to set Paul up again, trying to say again, like we talked about in the introduction, saying, hey, I don't know why Felix sent him up there. He really needs to be judged here. Can you send that man back? And of course, Festus, not knowing the situation, said, we'll meet down there if that's real. I was the one that sent it. So we'll meet down there if you want to speak on his case again. But Paul's enemies were relentless. They were bloodthirsty. They wanted to see his life end. Why? Because he was a thorn in their side. It almost makes me think of the two men that will be standing as testimony and witness during the 7-year time of tribulation. They're going to try to kill him. Now, eventually, God will give them permission to kill them, but then they're going to be risen back again from the dead. But during this whole time, they're going to try their best. And you sit there and think, well, how in the world are they going to try to kill people and then not die? I don't know. God's going to make it so that they're going to have an impenetrable force. Will it be an angel staying in front of them? Will it be physically the power of God on them? However he does it is how he's going to do it. But you can imagine today, we've got modern technology. You want to see a person dead, there's tons of ways to kill them. We've invented it down to a science. We have entire corporations that exist for no other purpose but to design better ways to kill people. From guns to bombs to lasers to poisons to whatever it may be. And you can just imagine them trying all these ways to kill these two witnesses during that period of testimony, and it doesn't work. These people kind of felt like that. They're trying to kill Paul. They try to do what they can. They've even had people that made death pacts, and if they didn't kill Paul, they died themselves. Now, I think it was likely they would follow through on it. The Bible doesn't tell us, but I would say more than likely they didn't. However, they tried everything, and it just wasn't working, but yet they still wanted him dead regardless. They were trying to sneak him back to Jerusalem so they could kill him on the way. They were hoping to talk Festus into allowing the Sanhedrin to take charge of what should have been a civil matter. It's nothing new. People trying to twist the course in their favor and make a mockery out of them to get the decisions they want. That's how we've got a current president that signs things into law, even though they're not really law. The same thing with the bathroom issue. That's not law, but yet they signed it so that schools could possibly lose funding. So they found a way to try to bend and twist the law to make it what they wanted to do. So that's nothing new. Christians today can mark it down that if you believe the Bible and you try to live the Bible, if you teach the Bible, then God's enemies will be after you. That's just the way it is. Because the devil still fights today. It's nothing, he's not an Old Testament character that got forgotten about. He's not a New Testament person that just took a vacation when the last book of the Bible was written and said, well, I'll just wait it out. Now, he's currently working today, still trying to end the furtherance and the progress of the gospel. So as we look at this, we're going to see as the governor evaluates the evil plot, we see that Festus, first of all, he does the right thing. He refuses to initially bend to their will. He said, but Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea and that he himself would depart shortly thither. So, that tells us, first of all, that when we commit ourselves to doing the will and work of God, that God will even take unsaved people and have them do what he's willing to do. Because the truth is, Festus was above Felix. He could have commanded him to be brought back. Just like that. Could have commanded it to happen. And they would have gone and gotten him. And on the way back, of course, Paul, when he arrived at Jerusalem, could have appealed unto Caesar. They had to send him back, but he would have been killed on the way. But God even used an unsaved man at this point to have the word of God prevail. And in fact, that he promised that he would make it to Rome. God says that, God told us again through the prophet Isaiah. He talked about a pagan ruler named Cyrus, and most of us are familiar with that name. But he gives good examples of how Cyrus was a man who was unsaved, and yet God used him to fulfill his will and the promise of God. In Isaiah 44:28, he said, He is my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure. Even saying to Jerusalem, Thou shalt be built, and to the temple thy foundation shall be laid. And again he said in 45:1, he said, Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand have I holden, to subdue nations before him, and I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the two-leaved gates, and the gate shall not be shut. Now he's talking about an unsaved man. God says that I held his right hand. Let's take that in for a minute. He said, I held his right hand. He said, that man worked hand in hand with me. He was an unsaved man. He said, if I want something to happen, I can make an unsaved man do my will. He said, I literally grabbed Cyrus by the right hand, and I held his hand. And I subdued kingdoms before him, and gave him the power he needed to then fulfill the law that I wanted to commit. He said, Cyrus before me was a nobody, was the best way to put it. He said, I set him up. I put him in position. I held his hand. I gave him power. He won victories over victories over victories because I was his victor. And then I put inside his brain and I needed to rebuild my city. He said, you think about the whole picture of that, how amazing it is. That, I mean, from Cyrus's, before Cyrus was even born, God had intended to use that man in order to work the city. Now, I'd love to think that Cyrus, through the constant witness and testimony of believers that came back, got saved. I obviously don't know that. I hope he did. But I do know that he was an unsaved man at that point. God used it. And God can do the same thing. He can take unsaved people that don't care, don't have any will or desire for the church, and just have a desire to do something that God put into their hearts. And that's what he did in this case. But just as God is sovereign over kings, he watched over his apostle. Festus thought it was his decision to keep Paul at Caesarea, but it wasn't his decision at all. He thought it was, but it was God. Paul was on a mission to go to Rome and not to Jerusalem, and God would make sure nothing stood in the way. Even so, the Jewish leaders didn't quit. They traveled back with Festus to Caesarea to bring charges against him, and when he arrived, Paul was again summoned to the court yet again. In verse 7, it said, when he was come, talking about Paul, the Jews came down from Jerusalem, stood round about, and laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. Two lessons in this that are very important. First of all, is that God's providential protection can cover us even when the world seems as if they're against us. Even when it seems like everyone stood against us, he said his hand can still protect. You know, you may be looking at our country right now and sitting there thinking, Lord, how in the world are you going to protect us? I mean, you've got a whole nation that basically has turned unto immoral labor. That just to raise my kids and then to somehow successfully not fall in the way of the world is a huge goal in and of itself. Let alone the fact that when you go to work, you can't escape it. I mean, you and I both know there's no, unless you work at the church, and even then I can guarantee you these people, but unless you work at the church, all day long you're going to hear cussing, all day long you're going to see bad influences, all day long you're going to work with people that have very low morals and will try to drag you into it along with them and try to make you a part of their decision. It doesn't matter where you work, what you do. You sit there and think, Lord, how can God even sustain a future generations of Christians through all of this? And yet God sustained Paul through some of the worst circumstances. We have whole nations that God kept in alive. God uniquely provided for them. And that doesn't mean that I'm preaching the fact that, if you're a Christian, well, I'm going to put a covering over you and nothing will touch you. No, that's not the case. But when God has something to do, He has you to do it, you will get it done. And again, it's encouraging for the fact that I've got 4 kids, 5 and under, and I just think, how the Lord am I ever going to raise them to be godly in a nation that is so rich, so evil. And I know y'all think, how is my grandkids going to grow up to become godly in a nation that becomes so wicked that everything screams to them to go against the will of God, to mock at God, to scorn, to say He doesn't exist, to say He may be wrong even if He doesn't exist. And yet God can provide, He can protect. And we see that in the life of Paul. He's providential protection covered. And he allowed, and second of all, is that God's enemies will attempt to smear and ruin us with charges and accusations they can't prove. And I'd love to say this is everyone outside the church. The devil has his devil angels. And I tell you the truth is they don't even know they are. There's people that go to church that they've gone to church their whole life. And if you ask them if they're saved, they say yes. And if you ask them how they know they're saved, well, I just come to church. Or they'll give a testimony of being baptized at one point or another. Or they'll talk about, just having that feeling. I just know God's okay with me. I talk to people that, say, how do you know you're saved? I saw a vision, or I saw this, or I stepped inside the church and I was really bad about myself. And I felt like I heard the Holy Spirit say everything's okay. I can tell you testimonies of real people that they base their salvation on standing in a car aisle and God saying in the Lord, everything's okay. And they may have heard of this, but it wasn't God. It wasn't God saying, your sin is nothing. I see you just how you are. We understand that God's enemies will attempt to smear us. Secondly, we look at this example. We saw first of all that Festus refused initially to follow their will, but secondly, we see the accusations against Paul were rehearsed by his accusers in verses 6 through 12. We don't hear all of the accusations, but the truth is they were all fake. Every one of them was made up. But they go through and rehearse all their accusations all over again. You can imagine each witness coming one by one, making accusations against Paul with no proof. You could almost imagine having a set of note cards in front of them. Why? Because you can say, well, you got to say it the same way every time. Because if not, you get mixed up and you don't lie about your lie. So you got to get your lie down straight. So you can almost imagine coming up and saying, yep, and he rose up against the kingdom and intended to take us down. And he said when he was in the church, he was going to tear it down. And then you sit there and then just going through all these accusations, and yet present no evidence. You know what a criminal investigation with no evidence is? It's a joke. And that's exactly what this was. Can you imagine being accused of murdering a person, and you stand before them and they say, well, I know he did it. Well, how do you know he did it? I just know. Do you have any evidence? Well, I know it. Isn't that enough? And the judge goes, okay, sure, guilty. Now, you look at that and say, what a joke that is. But that's exactly what they were doing. They were coming forward and saying, he's guilty. Well, how do you know he's guilty? Because I said he's guilty. Do you have any proof? Well, not enough proof. I said he's guilty. He's not. Even the Bible tells us that the Jews understood you had to have at least 2 or 3 witnesses. Not people who heard about it, but people who physically saw the act with their eyes, confirmed the act. They didn't even have that. They couldn't even bring that before them. And the Romans were no different. They had laws. They had to be brought before their accusers. Evidence had to be presented, and yet there was still no evidence. And yet they bring their accusations anyway. It tells us that a life void of God pushes us to behave in an unconscionable fashion. There's one of the greatest Russian novels of all time. The author of that wrote this. He said, if there is no God, everything is permitted. If there is no God, everything is permitted. He said, so without God, without a moral right or wrong, there is no right or wrong. So it's almost a mockery for people that are unsaved, that say they don't believe in God, to tell you what you're doing is wrong because, well, why do you say it's wrong? Well, because it is. So you're telling me there's a moral rule, but it's whatever you say it is. It's funny how you'll meet people like that. They'll tell you, you can't go into the street, get into an argument with a man and kill him, because that's murder. But yet, you can take a mother who's pregnant and take her to a building, to a doctor, and pay him some money, and he'll kill your child. But that's okay. But I can't kill a man on the street because I got angry with him. So, you sit there and say, how is that morally right? Well, when you don't have God, anything's right. Anything's admissible. Anything's okay. And you would look at these men, and these were upstanding men of their community more than likely. They didn't go take the scum off the city of Jerusalem. These were upstanding men with good careers, with good names. But yet they were willing to lie before a leader of the country. Why? Because without God, everything's permissible. Thirdly, we see that further proving the weakness of Festus, he expressed to Paul trying to appease the Jews. He said in verse 9, but Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure answered Paul and said, Wilt thou go up to Jerusalem and there be judged of these things before me? You know, a fickle commitment to doing the right thing always results in a weak moral woman. This man was a man who had a commitment to keep the rule. He was a leader, a legal ruler within the Roman government. It was his job to keep the law of the letter. When he was called to go to Caesarea to stand before the judgment seat, it was his job to stand there, to hear the accusations, and command the man to be free or continue to go to jail or be punished. Now, when you could present no evidence, no facts to the matter, what was Festus' job at this point right now? What was his job? As a leader, what should he have done? Release him. He had no evidence. They had no facts. All they had was hearsay. He should have said, case dismissed, and release Paul. But yet he didn't do what his job was to do. In fact, instead of doing his job, he tried to bend it because he wanted to still be popular with people. You don't want to make the people mad. You don't want to rise up against you. So, Paul, would you go back? And you couldn't command him to go back. He said, maybe go back and, at least let them judge you before their group. Paul said, no. And I love what Paul did because I think there's a whole lot of modern day truth in this because Christians get pushed really far on the subject, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute. But, Festus backpedaling showed his real colors. Undoubtedly, this might even taken Paul by surprise when he heard him say, would you go back? But without flinching, Paul took his civil rights seriously. He said, verses 10 to 11, Then said Paul, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews have I done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. If I be an offender or committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. But if there be none of these things where they accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. I appeal unto Jesus. What am I saying how this relates to? You ever heard someone tell you, well, you're a Christian, so you ought not carry a gun? Why would you carry a gun? You can kill someone. That's not what a Christian would do. Paul understood his rights and he held to it. You would say, well, you're a Christian, Paul. If they really want you to go there, you ought to just go. Paul said, nope, I'm all right. I'm right to say I can be right where I'm at. I don't need to go there. I'm doing it. You hear people that argue and say, well, if you're a Christian, you ought not to own a gun. You ought not to do this. You ought... No. Just because you're a Christian does not mean you toss your life aside. It doesn't mean that you toss your life away to protect yourself, protect your family, or do this or that. So even Paul understood again his civil rights and said, no, I stand by my rule given law life. And no, I will not go. I know, like I said, it's a whole side issue, but when I read that, I thought, man, that's good right there. He knew his rights and said no. We see fourthly, we can be fairly certain that Festus was probably even relieved when Paul chose to appeal unto Caesar. He was now completely off the hooks. The Jews couldn't be mad at him anymore, and he didn't have to deal with them anymore. You know, it's kind of like today. You look at the Georgia government. Georgia government was given a chance to vote on a bill that would free people of faith from being charged wrongfully for saying we don't want to participate in an event that goes against our beliefs. It was a law that simply stated that if a couple of the homosexual flavor came to you and told you they want you to participate in their wedding, to work at their wedding, you could say, I'm sorry, but that's against my beliefs. That's not saying I'll do no business with you. You know, let's say you're a photographer. If they come to you and say, I want you to take photos of our family, you can't say no to that. That's not what the law was about. It was just saying that you didn't have to go photograph the wedding. That if you were a baker, they come to you want a birthday cake. You don't say no to the birthday cake. But if they come and ask you to make their wedding cake, you say, I'm sorry, I just don't want to participate in that event. So all of these leaders supposedly backed it, signed the bill, sent it to the governor, and the governor with his crooked spine went ahead and nixed it. But do you know that the people within the lower groups in the Senate and everything in the House could have sat there and repassed it by a majority vote and oversaw his signature? Do you hear anything about that happening? No. You don't even hear them pushing for it. Why? Because the people in the lower groups want to be able to say, that's right, I voted for it. And then the people in the top group, he wants to be able to say, yep, I would agree with it, but no, that was wrong, so I signed it down. So they can all sit back and shake each other's hands and say, well, we did a good job, even though they didn't do what they were told to do, even though they didn't do what the people asked them to do. But they can pat themselves on the back and say, well, we tried, didn't we? That's exactly the way that Festus was. He said, oh, my hands are clean now. They can't be mad at me anymore. I'm going to be somebody else's problem. Again, that's no different than the way our current politicians run this country. Secondly, we see the governor expedites the extraordinary prisoner in verses 13 through 27. A few days had passed, and King Agrippa and his wife Bernice, had now arrived in Caesarea. He said in verse 13, and after certain days, King Agrippa and Bernice came to Caesarea to salute Festus. So now the next man in authority shows up in town, King Agrippa. Festus had briefed Agrippa concerning the famous prisoner, and he summarized the situation in verses 14 through 22. And it's interesting the way Festus frames the situation, trying to make himself out to be the best man in the whole situation. He's the hero of the group. He said in verse 16, it is not the manner of the Romans to deliver any man to die before that which he is accused. Have the accusers face to face, and have license to answer for himself concerning the crime laid against him. So he starts off, kind of straighten out his tie, saying, yeah, that's right. I was following the law, doing everything I was supposed to do. As he's telling the situation, he's trying to color the situation to justify his own actions. And we see, second of all, Festus shed new light concerning the conversation which the Jewish leaders had with him. He said in verses 18 through 19, against whom, when the accusers stood up, they brought none accusation of such things as I suppose, but had certain questions against him of their own superstition, and of one Jesus which was dead, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. So what Festus was saying, he said, the accusations they laid against him when they were in Jerusalem was not the accusations that they brought before him when he stood in Caesarea. He said the things that I would have supposed. So in other words, as he was in Jerusalem, they sat there and said, oh, he's guilty of insurrection. He's guilty against the Roman government. He's guilty against this. And then they show up, and all of a sudden they start accusing him of what they're really having about preaching Jesus as the Messiah. So what Festus even said at this point was their accusations had nothing to do with the law. It had nothing to do with Roman law. So at that point, when they started bringing up all these accusations, Festus should have immediately stopped the court and said, God, stop right here. This is not why you called this man before me. This is not why I came before you. The case is met. We're done. So there were two reasons Festus should have dismissed the case and freed Paul, but yet he didn't do it. Why? Because he was not as honorable as he pretended to be. But clearly we see again that he was trying to frame himself to look right. Then we see that Agrippa was intrigued by Festus' words and called for a personal look at Paul himself. He said in verse 22, then Agrippa said unto Festus, I would also hear the man myself. Tomorrow said he, thou shalt hear him. In a sense, you could see these two political scoundrels toying with the Apostle Paul. However, what they meant for evil, God would use for good. And we're really, like I said, this whole lesson is almost framing the very next lesson more than anything. Because the next lesson is the time when we're going to see Paul getting the real opportunity to stand and speak. But all of this leads up to another opportunity to Paul to witness to a group he did never have the chance to. Because as they get ready to have this, we're going to see the group that's brought before him. And it said in verse 23, and on the morrow, when Agrippa was come, and Bernice, so you've got the king and his wife, with great pomp, and was entered into the place of hearing with the chief captains. So now all of a sudden you've got the chief captains of all the Roman armies in the local area, the principal men of the city. Now you've got the mayor, you've got the local magistrates. He said, at Festus' commandment, Paul was brought forth. Now you got Festus. You have Festus, you have King Agrippa, you have all these important leaders brought before him to hear the accusation. And you can almost imagine Paul saying, well, Paul, we need you to come out and give another speech for what took place. He goes, well, who am I speaking before this time? The whole city. He goes, Lord, give me the beginning. Okay. And he steps out and goes, you guys think you're here to accuse me. Little did you know that God brought every one of you here to hear the gospel. If you just look at that and just think, man, that will blow your mind. Because God, he told him he was going to make it wrong. All he had to do was pick him up, drop him off at Caesarea, pick him back up, drop him off at Rome, witness before one man had died. The But God had bigger plans than that. He said, no, you're going to witness to people you never had the chance to. I'm going to make it happen. All these men thinking that they're lining up this situation to bring mockery to Paul, to declare him guilty before a group. And instead, God said, no, bring him all the way because you're going to hear as well. Now, whether you get saved or not is not the issue. You're going to hear. I think that's just so amazing the way God set this up. The testimony of Paul's accusers once again gets brought before him in verse 24, and their request was nothing short of death in verse 25. Festus rang his own bell again, appearing to consider justice his most passionate concern in verse 27. And then we see that Paul silently sits there and waits his moment to speak. Let me just read verses 1 and 2 of chapter 26. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, Thou art permitted to speak for thyself. But Paul stretched forth his hand and answered for himself, I think myself happy, King Agrippa, because I shall answer for myself this day before thee touching all the things whereof I am accused of the Jews. Even Paul, as he got ready to speak, said, couldn't hold it back. He said, God, thanks. I want to thank everyone for being here. Glad you showed up, King, wife, the magistrates. Thank you all for being here. You're fixing to get it. And I love that. Even Paul couldn't even help but say, I'm just happy to be here. And you and I, again, when we're in that kind of situation, we go, oh, but why us? Why am I here? How did you bring me to this thing? Paul didn't see it from that perspective. He saw it from God's perspective and said, oh God, look what you've wrought. Look who you've brought before me to preach. You know, I think there's a lot of times where we think something is a tragedy, but it was an opportunity. We miss it because we saw it as a tragedy and not as an opportunity. I think to the Larry Ketchell family, she's personally said to pastor, said, I've got an unsaved family because they weren't saved when their kids were younger. They got saved when they were older. She said, my family now is saying, what's the deal about? Why are these people from this church that you don't even know visiting you? Why are they stopping by to give you something to help you out? Who are these people? You know, what are you a part of? She said, I'm getting a chance to talk to my kids, and they're seeing Christianity live out in a way that they hadn't seen before. What was a tragedy is Brother Larry Ketchell being in the hospital, and you still don't know what's going to happen. God is using it for something to change in the family's life. You know, when some of the times we see tragedies along the way, all saw it as an opportunity. I think, I'm not perfect. I'd like to think I saw it as an opportunity, but I might have been on the woes me side. I don't know. I hope I don't have to face that. The whole nation won't be dead. But Paul, what the world would have called a tragedy, Paul called it an opportunity. And there's a lesson in that in itself. But it is time for us to finish as the bell is rung. Let's go ahead and pray. Lord, I do pray that you be with us this morning.